Father Thomas woke up at 5:30 in the morning, just like he did every single day. His small bedroom in the church house was cold. The October air in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, had started to bite with the promise of winter coming soon. He pulled on his black shirt and pants, the uniform he had worn for 32 years as a priest. His gray hair stuck up funny on one side. He patted it down while looking in the mirror. The town of Millbrook was still dark outside his window. Only a few streetlights glowed in the distance. This town had been his home for more than 3 decades. He knew every street, every family, every story. Millbrook used to be a busy coal mining town. Back in the old days, thousands of men worked in the mines. The sound of machinery filled the air. Families had good money. Kids played in clean parks. Stores stayed open late, but those days were gone now. The mines closed down in the 1980s. Young people moved away to find work in bigger cities. The population dropped from 12,000 to just 3,400 people. Many houses stood empty. Some had broken windows. The main street had more closed shops than open ones. The movie theater that used to show films every weekend was now just a building with faded posters still hanging in the windows. Still, one thing remained strong in Millbrook. St. Mary's Church stood tall in the center of town. Its white walls needed fresh paint, but the building was solid. The bell tower reached up into the sky like a finger pointing to heaven. That bell was over 100 years old. It had called people to prayer through world wars, through good times and bad times, through births and deaths. Everyone in town could hear it ring. The sound traveled across the valley, bouncing off the hills. Father Thomas made his coffee and ate a simple breakfast of toast and jam. He read from his Bible for 20 minutes, a morning habit he never skipped. Then he put on his coat and walked across the small yard to the church. His breath made clouds in the cold air. The church door creaked when he opened it. He loved that sound. It meant he was home. Inside, the church was quiet and peaceful. Rows of wooden pews lined both sides of the center aisle. Candles flickered near the altar. The morning light was just starting to come through the stained glass windows, making colored patterns on the floor. Father Thomas walked slowly down the aisle, his footsteps echoing. He liked being here alone before anyone else arrived. It gave him time to think and pray. But this morning was different. Someone was already there. In the front pew, a thin figure sat hunched over. Father Thomas stopped walking. His heart beat a little faster. He walked closer and recognized the boy immediately. Timothy Walsh, 14 years old, wearing a gray hoodie that was too big for him and jeans with holes in the knees. His backpack sat on the pew next to him. Timothy was supposed to be at home getting ready for school. It was only 6:15 in the morning. School didn't start until 8. Father Thomas had known Timothy since the boy was baptized as a baby. Timothy used to be cheerful and talkative. He served as an altar boy, helping during Sunday Mass. He would light the candles and carry the Bible. He always had a big smile, but that smile had disappeared 6 months ago. That's when Timothy's father, Robert Walsh, fell from a ladder at a construction site. Robert broke his back in 3 places. The doctor said he might never work again. The injury changed everything for the Walsh family. Robert was the main worker in the house. His wife Maria cleaned houses for money, but it wasn't enough. She took on 2 more cleaning jobs. She worked from early morning until late at night, 7 days a week. The family had to give up small things first. No more eating out, not even at the cheap burger place. Then bigger things. Timothy's little sister Emma had to quit her soccer team because they couldn't pay the fees. They sold their second car. They started buying the cheapest food at the discount grocery store. Sometimes Maria skipped meals so the kids could eat more. Timothy felt every bit of it. He stopped hanging out with his friends. He became quiet at school. His grades dropped. He stopped coming to church as much. When he did come, he sat in the back and left quickly. Father Thomas had tried to talk to him several times. He would ask, "Timothy, how are you doing? Do you want to talk?" But Timothy would just nod and say he was fine, then walk away fast. Father Thomas knew the boy was not fine. He could see it in Timothy's eyes. They looked empty and sad. The light that used to be there was gone. Father Thomas had talked to Maria about it. She cried and said she was worried too, but she was working so much she barely saw her son anymore. She felt like she was failing as a mother. Father Thomas told her she was doing her best, that God understood, that things would get better, but he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. Now here was Timothy, sitting alone in the dark church before sunrise. Father Thomas's stomach tightened with worry. Something was very wrong. He could feel it in his bones. The way Timothy sat so still, staring at nothing. The way his shoulders curved inward, like he was trying to make himself disappear. Father Thomas cleared his throat softly so he wouldn't scare the boy. Timothy's head jerked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He had been crying. When he saw Father Thomas, he quickly wiped his face with his sleeve. "Timothy," Father Thomas said gently. His voice echoed slightly in the empty church. "You're here early, son. Is everything okay?" Timothy stared at him for a long moment. His lip trembled. For a second, Father Thomas thought the boy might finally open up and talk about whatever was eating him alive inside. But then Timothy's face went blank. He pulled the mask back on, the mask that said everything was fine when nothing was fine. "I just wanted to pray before school," Timothy said. His voice was flat and quiet. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay," Father Thomas said. He sat down in the pew behind Timothy, not too close. He didn't want to crowd the boy. "You can always come here, Timothy. Day or night. This is your church, your home." Timothy nodded but didn't say anything else. He picked up his backpack and held it in his lap. His hands gripped the straps tight, knuckles turning white. Father Thomas noticed the backpack seemed full, heavier than a normal school bag. "Timothy, if something is bothering you, you can tell me," Father Thomas said. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out together. You don't have to carry heavy things alone." Timothy stood up suddenly. "I have to go," he said. He didn't look at Father Thomas. "Thanks, Father." He walked quickly toward the side door of the church, the one that led to the bell tower. Father Thomas frowned. That wasn't the way to the main exit. "Timothy, where are you going?" he called out, but Timothy was already through the door. It closed behind him with a heavy thud. Father Thomas stood up, confused and worried. Why would Timothy go toward the tower? Maybe he needed to use the bathroom. There was one near the tower entrance, or maybe he just wanted a different way out. Father Thomas walked back toward the altar to prepare for morning mass. A few people would arrive soon for the early service. He had to get the bread and wine ready, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged things on the altar. He kept looking back at the door where Timothy had disappeared. The bell tower. Timothy had gone up there many times before to help with maintenance. The boy used to love climbing those stairs. Father Thomas had shown him how to ring the bell properly, how to pull the rope with the right rhythm. 3 rings for regular mass, steady slow rings for a funeral, fast happy rings for Easter and Christmas. Father Thomas tried to focus on his work, but his mind wouldn't settle. He decided to go check on Timothy, make sure the boy was all right. He walked toward the tower door and pulled it open. Inside, he could see the narrow stone staircase that spiraled upward. The stairs were worn smooth from over a century of footsteps. It was dark in the stairwell. A single light bulb hung from a wire, barely lighting the way. Father Thomas called up the stairs. "Timothy, are you okay up there?" No answer came back. Only silence. Father Thomas put his hand on the cold stone wall and started to climb. His knees ached with each step. He wasn't young anymore. The stairs seemed steeper than he remembered. He counted them as he went. 20 steps, 40 steps, 60 steps. He was breathing hard when he heard it. A sound from above. A shuffling noise. Then something else. A sound that made his blood run cold. It was crying. Timothy was crying, and the sound echoed down the stone tower like a ghost. Timothy climbed the 127 steps to the top of the bell tower. He had counted them many times before when he helped Father Thomas with cleaning and maintenance. His legs felt heavy, like they were filled with sand. His backpack weighed on his shoulders. Inside was his school binder, but also something else. A folded piece of paper. A letter he had written last night. The letter was for his mom, his dad, and his little sister Emma. He had spent 3 hours writing it. Tears had dripped onto the paper, making the ink run in some places. He told them he was sorry. Sorry for being another mouth to feed. Sorry for the money they spent on his food and clothes. Sorry that he couldn't fix what was broken. He told Emma to be strong and stay in school. He told his dad that the accident wasn't his fault. He told his mom that she was the best mother in the world, and she deserved better than a son who couldn't help. Timothy reached the top of the stairs. A heavy wooden door stood in front of him. He pushed it open. The cold October wind hit him immediately, taking his breath away. He stepped out onto the observation deck. This was the highest point in all of Millbrook. From here he could see the entire town spread out below. The houses looked like toys. Cars on the streets looked like ants crawling along. The bell hung above him on thick wooden beams. It was huge and made of brass that had turned green in spots from age and weather. A thick rope hung down from the bell. Timothy had pulled that rope hundreds of times. He knew exactly how hard to pull to make different sounds. He walked slowly to the edge of the observation deck. A stone wall came up to his waist. Beyond that was nothing but air and a drop of 70 feet to the ground below. The church parking lot was down there, empty this early in the morning. The pavement looked hard and gray. Timothy put his hands on the cold stone wall. His fingers were numb from the cold, or maybe from fear. He wasn't sure anymore. He looked out at the town where he had lived his whole life. He could see his school 3 blocks away, the brick building where he sat in classrooms and pretended to pay attention, while his mind spun with worry. He could see the small park where he used to play when he was little, the swings where Emma used to beg him to push her higher and higher while she laughed. He could see the street where his house was, though he couldn't see the actual house from here. It was hidden behind other buildings, but he knew it was there. The small yellow house with the broken gutter and the yard that needed mowing. His dad used to mow that yard every Saturday morning. Now the grass grew tall because no one had time. Everything felt wrong. The world felt too heavy. Timothy felt like he was drowning and no one could see him going under. At school, kids talked about their problems. Worry about a math test, stress about asking someone to the dance, upset because their parents wouldn't buy them the newest video game. Timothy wanted to scream at them. He wanted to tell them they didn't know what real problems were, but he said nothing. He smiled when he was supposed to smile. He laughed when something funny happened. He wore the mask every single day. The mask that said he was fine. But under the mask he was falling apart piece by piece. Last week his mom had come home crying. Timothy heard her in the kitchen talking to his dad. She thought Timothy and Emma were asleep, but Timothy was awake. He heard everything. The electric bill was overdue. They might shut off the power. The landlord wanted the rent that was 3 weeks late. They had $47 in the bank account. $47 to last until the end of the month, and it was only the 10th. Timothy had done the math in his head. Without him, his family would save money. A lot of money. No food for him. No clothes. No school supplies. No insurance costs, nothing. His life insurance policy from when he was born was still active. His parents had gotten it as a gift from his grandparents. $5,000 if he died. That money could help his family. It could pay bills. It could give Emma her soccer back. It could take pressure off his mom. The thought had grown in his mind like a weed, spreading and taking over everything else. It seemed logical. It seemed like the only solution. He was the problem. If he removed himself, the problem would be solved. He had thought about it for weeks. Different ways. Different times. But he kept backing out. Something always stopped him. Until last night. Last night, Emma had asked their mom if she could get new shoes. Her old ones had holes in the bottom. She tried to cover the holes with cardboard, but it didn't work. Her socks got wet when it rained. Their mom had looked at Emma with such sadness in her eyes. She said, "Not this month, baby. Maybe next month." But Timothy knew next month would be the same. And the month after that, there was never enough money. There would never be enough money. So Timothy made his decision. He would do it this morning before school when no one would see. He would climb the tower and he would jump. It would be fast. It would be over. And his family would be free of the burden that was him. But now, standing at the edge looking down at the ground so far below, Timothy felt something he didn't expect. Fear. Raw, cold gripping fear that made his legs shake. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands gripped the stone wall so tight his fingers hurt. A voice in his head screamed at him to step back. Another voice told him to go forward. The two voices fought each other, pulling him in different directions. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe. In and out. In and out. He thought about Emma, his little sister who was only 10 years old. She followed him around the house constantly. She thought he was the coolest person in the world. She asked him to help with her homework even though he was terrible at explaining things. She saved half her Halloween candy to share with him. What would this do to her? Would she understand? Would she hate him? He thought about his mom, Maria Walsh, who worked her fingers raw cleaning other people's houses, who came home exhausted every night but still made dinner, who still tucked Emma into bed even though she could barely stand up, who kissed Timothy on the forehead and told him she loved him every single day. How would she survive losing her son? Would it break her completely? He thought about his dad, Robert Walsh, who used to be so strong and proud, who taught Timothy how to throw a baseball and how to fix a leaky faucet, who now sat in a wheelchair most days, his face tight with pain and shame. He already felt like he had failed his family. What would this do to him? Tears poured down Timothy's face. He couldn't stop them. They came like a flood, all the tears he had held back for 6 months. He sobbed so hard his whole body shook. The wind carried the sound away. No one could hear him up here. He was alone with his pain and his terrible choice. Then something inside him shifted, some small part of him that still wanted to live, some tiny spark that refused to go out. His hand moved toward the bell rope without him really thinking about it. He grabbed the rope with both hands. The rough fiber scratched his palms. What was he doing? He didn't know. But he started pulling the rope, hard, fast, with no pattern or rhythm, just pulling and pulling. The bell rang out loud and chaotic. Clang, 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 clang. The sound was deafening up here in the tower. It hurt his ears. But he kept pulling. He wasn't ringing the bell to call people to church. He was ringing it because he needed help and didn't know how else to ask. He was ringing it because some part of him wanted to be saved. He was ringing it like a drowning person waves their arms in the water, hoping someone will see. Down below in the town, people stopped what they were doing. The bell was ringing at the wrong time and in the wrong way. Something was wrong at the church. People stepped out of their houses. They looked toward the bell tower. Some grabbed their phones. In the church below, Father Thomas froze when he heard the bell. He was still on the stairs, climbing slowly toward the top. But that ringing, that desperate, chaotic ringing, his heart knew immediately what it meant. Someone was in terrible trouble. Timothy was in terrible trouble. Father Thomas pushed his tired legs to move faster. He climbed the remaining stairs as quick as he could. His breath came in gasps. His knees screamed at him, but he didn't slow down. He had to reach Timothy before it was too late. The bell kept ringing. Clang, clang, clang. The sound echoed across Millbrook, bouncing off buildings and hills. It sounded like an alarm, like a cry for help, like an SOS signal sent out into the universe begging for anyone who could hear it to come quickly. And someone did hear it, 2 blocks away, sitting in a rental car outside the town's only diner. A man looked up from his phone. John Cena had been checking his schedule for the day. He had a Make-A-Wish visit scheduled in Pittsburgh that afternoon. He was in Pennsylvania early, and his assistant suggested they stop for breakfast in this small town. But those bells, something about them made his whole body go on alert. John had worked with crisis centers and suicide prevention programs for years. He had trained himself to recognize signs of distress, and those bells were screaming distress, he didn't think. He just moved. He opened his car door and got out. His security team looked at him confused. "Stay here," he told them. Then he started running toward the church. His legs carried him fast across the parking lot, across the street toward St. Mary's. John Cena ran across Main Street without looking. A pickup truck honked at him and swerved. He barely noticed. His focus was locked on the church bell tower. The chaotic ringing continued. Clang, clang, clang. Each ring felt like a punch to his chest. He knew that sound.
He had heard it before, not with his ears, but with his heart.
It was the sound of someone screaming for help without words. His assistant, Marcus, jumped out of the car and ran after him. "John, wait! What's going on?" But John didn't slow down. His athletic body moved fast. Years of training and staying in shape meant he could run without getting tired quickly. People on the sidewalk turned to stare. Some recognized him. "Is that John Cena?" someone said. But he ignored them all. He reached the church in less than a minute. The white building stood solid and old. The front doors were tall and wooden with iron handles. John grabbed one handle and pulled hard. The door swung open and he rushed inside. The sudden quiet after the street noise was jarring. Then he heard it again. The bell, muffled now by the stone walls but still urgent and wrong. Inside the church, the morning light filtered through stained glass windows. Rows of wooden pews stretched toward the altar. Candles flickered. An older woman knelt in prayer near the front. She looked up startled when John burst in. Her eyes went wide. "The bell," John said, breathing hard. "Someone's in the tower?" The woman pointed with a shaking hand toward a side door. "There, the stairs. Father Thomas went up a minute ago. Something's wrong. The bell never rings like this." John ran toward the door she pointed at. He yanked it open and saw the narrow stone staircase spiraling upward into darkness. The bell rang louder here. The sound vibrated through the stone, making the air itself shake. He started climbing. His legs pumped. His hands touched the cold stone walls for balance. The stairs were worn smooth by 100 years of footsteps. They curved around and around. John counted them automatically. 20, 40, 60. His breath echoed in the tight space. Above him he heard voices. A man's voice, older and gentle, then a younger voice, high and broken with tears. John climbed faster. His heart hammered not from the exercise but from the urgency. He had been in situations like this before. 3 years ago he had talked a teenage girl off a bridge in California. She had posted goodbye messages on social media. A friend had seen them and called for help. John had been nearby doing publicity for a movie. He went to the bridge and talked to her for 2 hours until she agreed to come back over the railing. 2 years ago, he had gotten a phone call from a mother whose son had locked himself in a bathroom with pills. The son was a fan who had met John at a wrestling event. John drove 3 hours to get there. He sat outside that bathroom door and talked through it until the boy opened it and gave him the pills. This was different, though. John didn't know who was up there. He didn't know their story, but it didn't matter. Someone needed help. That was enough. He reached the top of the stairs. A wooden door stood slightly open. Through the gap he could see gray sky and hear the wind. He could hear Father Thomas's voice clearly now. "Timothy, please, son. Come back inside. Whatever you're facing, we can face it together." A boy's voice answered, thin and desperate. "Nobody can fix this, Father. My dad can't work. My mom is working 3 jobs. My sister had to quit soccer because we can't afford it. It's all falling apart and I'm just another burden. They'd be better off without me." John's chest tightened. He understood those words. He had felt them himself once, a long time ago, when he was younger and struggling to make it as a wrestler, when he had $7 in his bank account and couldn't afford to eat, when he had called his dad crying, saying he was a failure. His dad had said words he never forgot. "You're not a burden. You're a blessing. Don't you ever forget that." John pushed the door open quietly. The observation deck was small, maybe 10 feet across. The huge brass bell hung above on wooden beams. The rope hung down, still swinging slightly. Father Thomas stood a few feet inside the door. An old priest with gray hair and kind eyes. Beyond him, near the stone wall at the edge, stood a boy, 14, maybe 15 years old, thin, wearing a gray hoodie too big for him. His hands gripped the stone wall. His face was red and wet with tears. Father Thomas heard the door and turned. His eyes widened when he saw John. Recognition flashed across his face. But the priest was smart. He understood immediately that this famous person running up here meant help had arrived. He stepped aside slightly. John caught Father Thomas's eye and gave a small nod. Then he spoke, keeping his voice calm and friendly. "Hey man, I'm John. Those bells, that was smart thinking. You got my attention and I came running." Timothy turned his head. Confusion crossed his tear-stained face. He looked at John, then at Father Thomas, then back at John. Why are you here?" His voice was hoarse from crying. John leaned against the doorframe, deliberately casual. He didn't move toward Timothy. He knew from experience that getting too close too fast could spook someone. "I heard someone who needed help," he said. "And here's something nobody tells you. Asking for help, making noise when you're drowning? That's not weakness. That's courage, brother. That's the hardest thing any of us ever does." Timothy stared at him. The boy's hands still gripped the wall, but John noticed they weren't gripping as hard. "I don't feel brave," Timothy said. "I feel like a coward. Why?" John asked. He kept his voice gentle. "Because you're hurting. Because you reached a point where the pain got too big to hold inside? That's not cowardice, man. That's being human." Father Thomas moved quietly to sit on the stone steps, giving John space to work. The priest clasped his hands and bowed his head. John knew he was praying. That was good. They needed all the help they could get. The wind blew across the tower. It was cold and sharp. John noticed Timothy wasn't wearing a jacket, just that thin hoodie. The boy had to be freezing. "It's cold up here," John said. "How long have you been standing there?" Timothy shrugged. I don't know. A while. He wiped his face with his sleeve. You should go. Both of you. I don't want you to see this. See what? John asked. Timothy's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Me jumping, the words hung in the air like ice. Father Thomas made a small sound, like someone had punched him. John felt the words hit him hard too, but he kept his face calm. Okay, he said slowly. I hear you. But before you do anything, can I just talk to you for a few minutes? That's all I'm asking. A few minutes of your time. Timothy looked at him suspiciously. Why do you care? You don't even know me. You're right, I don't know you, John said. I don't know your name. I don't know your story. But I know pain when I see it. And I know what it feels like to think the world would be better without you in it. So yeah, I care. Because I've been somewhere close to where you are right now. This caught Timothy's attention. You're John Cena, you're famous. You're rich. You have everything. John smiled sadly. You'd be surprised how little any of that matters when you're fighting battles in your own head. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Can I tell you something? When I was 23 years old, I was living in my car. I had moved to California to become a wrestler. I had no money. No connections, nothing. I would work out at a gym during the day and sleep in my 1991 Lincoln Continental at night. Timothy listened, his grip on the wall loosening slightly. I would call my dad from payphones, John continued. I couldn't afford a cell phone. One night I called him crying. I told him I was a failure. I told him I was dragging down everyone who believed in me. I told him maybe I should just give up and come home. You know what he said? Timothy shook his head. He said, John, the only real failure is giving up. Then he said something else. He said, your life isn't just about you. It's about everyone you're going to help. Everyone you're going to inspire. Every kid who's going to look up to you and think, if John Cena can make it, maybe I can too. At the time, I thought he was crazy. I couldn't see any of that. All I could see was my failure. John took a careful step closer. Timothy didn't move back. But my dad was right, John said. Not about me being special. I'm not special. I'm just a guy who kept going when he wanted to quit. And you know what I learned? The times when we want to give up the most are usually right before something changes, right before things get better. Things won't get better for my family, Timothy said. His voice cracked. My dad is broken. We have no money. It's never going to change. Maybe not tomorrow, John said. Maybe not next week. But Timothy, he used the boy's name that he had heard Father Thomas say. Your family doesn't need you to fix everything. They need you to be there, to be their son, their brother. That's all. That's everything. Tears rolled down Timothy's face again. I'm costing them money just by existing, food, clothes, everything. If I was gone, they'd have more. John shook his head firmly. That's the depression talking. That's the pain lying to you. You want to know what would really cost your family? Losing you. Your mom would never recover. Your dad would blame himself forever. Your little sister would grow up with a hole in her heart that nothing could ever fill. You think you're saving them money? You'd be destroying them. Timothy's whole body shook. Not from the cold anymore, but from something deeper. The tears came harder now. You don't understand, he said, his voice breaking into pieces. Emma had to quit soccer. She loved soccer so much. She would practice dribbling in the backyard for hours. She had dreams of playing in high school, maybe college. Now she can't even afford cleats. John took another small step forward. He was only about 6 feet away from Timothy now. That's really hard, he said. I can see how much you love your sister. How much it hurts to see her lose something she loves. She never complains, Timothy said. That's the worst part. Mom told her she couldn't play anymore, and Emma just said okay. She went to her room and I heard her crying through the wall. She cried for hours, and I couldn't do anything. I'm her big brother and I couldn't do anything. John's throat felt tight. Timothy, look at me. The boy raised his red, swollen eyes. You being alive is doing something. Every single day you wake up, you're doing something. You're showing Emma that even when life is hard, you keep going. You're teaching her that family sticks together no matter what. But I want to do more, Timothy said desperately. I want to fix it. I want to make Dad's back better. I want to give Mom a break. I want to get Emma back on that soccer field. But I'm just a kid. I have no power. No money. Nothing. Father Thomas spoke up from where he sat on the steps. His voice was gentle. Timothy, do you remember the story of the loaves and fishes? Jesus fed 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. A little boy gave what he had, even though it seemed like nothing, and Jesus turned it into a miracle. Timothy looked at the priest. What does that have to do with me? You don't need to be everything, Father Thomas said. You just need to be you. That's enough. That's always been enough, John nodded. The priest is right. And here's something else. When I was broke and sleeping in my car, you know what kept me going? It wasn't some big plan. It wasn't knowing the future would be great. It was small things. One day a kid recognized me at the gym. He asked for my autograph. I wasn't famous. I was nobody. But to him I was cool. That small moment made me think maybe I mattered. Maybe my existence meant something. Timothy wiped his nose on his sleeve. Nobody needs my autograph. John smiled slightly. But people need you. Your sister needs her brother to help her with homework, even if you're not great at it. Your mom needs you to hug her when she comes home tired. Your dad needs you to remind him that he's still a father. Still important even if he can't work right now. Those things matter more than money. The bills still need to be paid, Timothy said. But his voice was quieter now, less certain. They do, John agreed. And that's really hard. But you know what? Adults are supposed to handle bills. That's not your job. Your job is to be 14, to go to school, to hang out with friends, to be a kid. You've been carrying weight that was never meant for your shoulders. Timothy looked down at the ground far below. His hands rested on the wall but weren't gripping anymore. I wrote them a letter, he said quietly. It's in my backpack. I told them I was sorry. Father Thomas stood up slowly. Can I see the letter? Timothy hesitated, then nodded. He pulled off his backpack and unzipped it. He took out a folded piece of notebook paper. The paper was wrinkled and stained with tears. He handed it to Father Thomas without moving from the wall. Father Thomas unfolded it carefully. His eyes moved across the words. John watched the priest's face change. Pain crossed his features. His eyes filled with tears. When he finished reading, he looked up at Timothy with such sadness and love. Timothy, Father Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion, this is the most heartbreaking thing I've ever read. But it's also wrong. Every single thing you apologize for is wrong. You are not a burden. You never were. You never will be. My parents think so, Timothy said. No, Father Thomas said firmly. I know your parents. I've known them for 20 years. I've seen the way they look at you. I've seen the pride in their eyes. I've heard your mother talk about you. She brags about you, Timothy. About how kind you are. How smart you are. How you help with Emma without being asked. She thinks you're wonderful. Timothy shook his head. Then why is she always crying? Because life is hard right now, John said. Because she's worried about keeping a roof over your head and food on the table. But not because of you. You're not the problem. You're one of the reasons she keeps fighting. You and Emma are why she works 3 jobs. Because she loves you more than anything. A bird flew past the tower. Its wings made a whooshing sound. The moment felt suspended in time. 4 people on top of a bell tower. A priest, a wrestling superstar, a boy on the edge. And the question hanging in the cold October air. Would Timothy choose life or death? John took a deep breath. Timothy, I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Not just with your ears, but with your heart. He waited until Timothy looked at him. Depression is a liar. It's the best liar in the world. It tells you nobody cares. It tells you nothing will get better. It tells you you're worthless. Every single word is a lie. But when you're in that dark place, the lies sound like truth. Timothy's chin trembled. How do you know the difference? Between lies and truth? That's the hard part, John said honestly. When you're in it, you can't always tell. That's why you need other people. People who can see clearly when you can't. And right now I'm seeing clearly. I'm seeing a kid who loves his family so much he'd rather die than see them struggle. That's not worthless. That's love. Twisted and hurting, but love. John took one more step. He was close now. Close enough to reach out and touch Timothy if he needed to. I'm also seeing a kid who rang a bell. Who asked for help even though he was scared. Who climbed up here to end things but then couldn't do it without one last cry to the universe. You know why you couldn't just jump? Because part of you wants to live. Part of you knows this isn't the answer. Timothy's face crumpled. He turned away from the edge and buried his face in his hands. Great sobs shook his thin body. John moved quickly. He wrapped his arms around Timothy and pulled him close. The boy collapsed against him, crying into John's chest. "I got you," John said quietly. "I got you, brother. You're okay. You're safe." Father Thomas stood and came closer. He put his hand on Timothy's back. They stood there together, holding up this broken boy who had nearly broken completely. They stayed like that for a long time. The wind blew. The sun rose higher. Down below, people gathered in the church parking lot. Someone had called the police when the bell started ringing strangely. 2 police cars sat with their lights flashing. An ambulance waited. People from town stood in groups looking up at the tower, wondering what was happening. Inside the church, Maria Walsh ran through the doors. Someone had called her. They told her Timothy was on the bell tower and something was wrong. She ran like she had never run before. She didn't care that she still wore her cleaning uniform from the house she had been working at. She didn't care that people were staring. Her baby was up there. She burst through the tower door and started climbing the stairs. Her lungs burned. Her legs shook. But she didn't stop. She climbed and climbed. Behind her came Robert Walsh in his wheelchair. Someone from the church had driven him over. He couldn't climb the stairs, but he had to get as close as he could. He wheeled himself to the bottom of the tower and stared up into the darkness, tears streaming down his face. At the top, John felt Timothy's sobs start to slow. The boy's breathing became more regular. John pulled back slightly and looked at Timothy's face. "Hey," he said gently. "Look at me." Timothy raised his eyes. They were puffy and red but focused. "You with me? You here?" Timothy nodded weakly. "Good," John said. "Now I need to know. Are you safe? If I let go, are you going to hurt yourself?" Timothy looked back at the edge of the tower. Then he looked at John, then at Father Thomas. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't trust myself." "That's okay," John said. "Thank you for being honest. That takes guts." He kept one arm around Timothy's shoulders. "How about we go downstairs? Get you somewhere warm?" Before Timothy could answer, they heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. Fast, desperate footsteps. Maria Walsh appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wild with fear. She saw Timothy standing there with John's arm around him. She saw the backpack on the ground. She saw her son's tear-stained face. "Timothy!" she screamed. She ran across the observation deck and grabbed him, pulling him away from the edge, away from the wall, away from any danger. She held him so tight it must have hurt. She buried her face in his hair and sobbed. "My baby," Maria Walsh cried over and over. "My baby, my baby, my baby." She held Timothy like she would never let him go. Her hands gripped his hoodie. Her tears soaked into his shoulder. She shook with the force of her crying. Timothy stood stiff at first. Then something inside him broke open. He wrapped his arms around his mother and held on. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "No," Maria said fiercely. She pulled back and grabbed his face in both hands. She looked directly into his eyes. "Don't you dare apologize. Don't you dare." Her voice was fierce and broken at the same time. "You are my son. You are my beautiful, precious son. Do you understand me?" Timothy's face crumpled again. "But Mom, the money. The bills. I'm making everything worse." Maria made a sound like she had been stabbed. "Is that what you think? Timothy, is that what you've been thinking?" She pulled him close again. "Baby, you are not the problem. You could never be the problem. You are the reason I keep going. You and Emma, you're everything." John stepped back to give them space. He caught Father Thomas's eye. The priest's face showed relief and lingering fear. They both knew how close this had been, how close Timothy had come to a choice he could never take back. Father Thomas picked up Timothy's backpack from the ground. He pulled out the letter and handed it to Maria. "He wrote this," the priest said quietly. "You should read it, but maybe later, when you're all home and safe." Maria took the letter with a shaking hand. She looked at it like it was a snake. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. "Let's go downstairs," she said to Timothy. "Let's get you out of this cold." They moved toward the door. Timothy walked between his mother and Father Thomas. John followed behind. They went slowly down the spiral stairs, one step at a time. Timothy's legs shook. He held on to his mother with one hand and the wall with the other. When they reached the bottom, Robert Walsh sat waiting in his wheelchair. His face was wet with tears. When he saw Timothy, he let out a sob. "Son," he said. "Timothy, come here." Timothy walked to his father. He knelt down beside the wheelchair. Robert grabbed him and pulled him into a hug. The strong man who used to lift heavy beams at construction sites. The father who had taught Timothy to ride a bike and throw a baseball. Now he sat in a chair, his body broken, but his love still strong as steel. "I'm sorry, Dad," Timothy said into his father's shoulder. "I'm sorry you got hurt. I'm sorry I couldn't help. I'm sorry for everything." Robert pulled back and looked at his son. His face was fierce. "Timothy Walsh, you listen to me. My accident was not your fault. The bills are not your fault. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me?" His voice was stronger than it had been in months. "You are 14 years old. You're supposed to worry about school and friends and video games, not about keeping a roof over our heads. That's my job, mine and your mother's." "But you can't work," Timothy said. "Not right now," Robert said. "But that doesn't make me useless. And it doesn't make you responsible for fixing it." He squeezed Timothy's shoulders. "I would rather lose everything. The house, the car, everything. I would rather live in a tent under a bridge than lose you. Do you understand that? You are worth more than every dollar in the world." Timothy nodded, unable to speak. The tears wouldn't stop. An ambulance crew waited near the church entrance. A paramedic came forward. A woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Hi, Timothy," she said gently. "I'm Sarah. I'm a paramedic. I'd like to check you out, make sure you're okay. Is that all right?" Timothy looked at his mother. She nodded. "It's okay, baby. Let her help." They moved to the back of the ambulance. Sarah checked Timothy's vital signs. His blood pressure was high from stress. His hands were cold. But physically he was okay. "I think we should take him to the hospital," Sarah said to Maria. "Just for an evaluation. Make sure he's safe." Maria nodded immediately. "Yes, whatever he needs." "I don't want to go to the hospital," Timothy said. Fear crossed his face. John, who had been standing nearby, spoke up. "Hey, Timothy, can I talk to you for a second?" Timothy nodded. John walked with him a few feet away from the others. "I know hospitals are scary, but here's the thing. What you're feeling, what you're going through, it's a medical thing. Like if you broke your arm, you wouldn't try to fix a broken arm by yourself, right? You'd go to a doctor." "It's not the same," Timothy said. "It's exactly the same," John said. "Your brain is sick right now. Not because you're weak or broken, but because depression is a real medical condition. And there are people at the hospital who know how to help. Doctors who specialize in exactly what you're going through. They can help you feel better." Timothy looked down at his feet. "What if they lock me up? What if I can't come home?" John crouched down to be at eye level with Timothy. "I'm not going to lie to you. They might want you to stay for a few days, to make sure you're safe, to get you started on treatment. But it's not prison. It's help. And your parents will visit every day. Father Thomas will visit, and I'll visit too. I promise you that. I'll come back and check on you." Timothy looked surprised. "You will?" "Absolutely," John said. "You think I'd run up a bell tower and then just disappear? We're in this together now, brother. I'm not going anywhere." That seemed to decide it for Timothy. He nodded. "Okay, I'll go." Sarah helped Timothy into the back of the ambulance. Maria climbed in beside him. Robert's wheelchair wouldn't fit, so he would have to follow in the car that someone from the church would drive. Emma, Timothy's little sister, was being picked up from school by a neighbor who would bring her to the hospital. Before the ambulance doors closed, Maria looked at John. Tears filled her eyes again. "Thank you," she said. Her voice broke. "Thank you for saving my son." John shook his head. Timothy saved himself. He rang that bell. He asked for help. That took more courage than anything I did. The ambulance doors closed. The lights came on and it drove away. John stood in the church parking lot and watched it go. His hands shook slightly. The adrenaline was wearing off and he felt suddenly exhausted. Father Thomas came to stand beside him. The priest looked old and tired. "I've been praying for that boy for months," he said quietly. "I knew he was hurting, but I didn't know how much. I should have pushed harder. Should have reached him sooner." "You can't think like that," John said. "You did what you could. You were there this morning. That's what matters." Father Thomas nodded but didn't look convinced. "What you did up there. The way you talked to him. You saved his life." John looked at the priest. "We both did. You, me, his parents, and Timothy himself. That's how it works. Nobody saves anybody alone." We all catch each other. The police officers came over to take statements. John explained what had happened. Father Thomas did the same. Then John's security team arrived, out of breath and worried. Marcus, his assistant, looked pale. Boss, what the hell happened? You just ran off. We tried to follow, but you were so fast. Sorry, John said. Emergency. Kid in trouble. Marcus looked at the police cars, the ambulance pulling away, the crowd of townspeople. Is everyone okay? Getting there, John said. The police finished their questions and left. The crowd slowly dispersed. People went back to their houses and jobs, though everyone would be talking about this for weeks. John Cena in Millbrook, a boy on the bell tower, a near tragedy prevented. Father Thomas invited John back into the church. They sat in the front pew, the same pew where Timothy had sat just an hour ago. The candles still flickered. The morning sun made patterns on the floor through the stained glass. I need to ask you something, Father Thomas said, and please be honest. Did you just happen to be here? Or was this divine intervention? John smiled slightly. I don't know, Father. I'm not religious, but I believe things happen for a reason. I believe we're supposed to help each other. Maybe the universe put me here this morning. Maybe it was random chance. Either way, I'm glad I was here. Father Thomas nodded. I've been a priest for 40 years. I've seen a lot of things I can't explain. Today is one of them. He looked at John with curiosity. You said you've been close to where Timothy was. You meant that literally? John was quiet for a moment. Not exactly the same, but close enough. When I was younger, I went through a really dark time. I never stood on a ledge. But I understand that emptiness. That feeling that the world would be better without you. It's a lie, but when you're in it, it feels true. How did you get through it? Father Thomas asked. People, John said simply. People who refused to let me disappear. My dad, my friends, a wrestling coach who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They kept pulling me back until I could stand on my own again. He paused. That's why I do what I do. The Make-A-Wish visits. The crisis work. I figure if people saved me, I owe it to save others when I can. Father Thomas smiled. That's grace. Whether you call it God or the universe or human kindness, that's grace. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then John stood. I should probably go. I still have that Make-A-Wish visit in Pittsburgh this afternoon. Kid with leukemia who wants to meet me. Of course, Father Thomas said. He walked John to the door. At the entrance, he stopped and took John's hand in both of his. Thank you, he said. From me, from Timothy's family, from this whole town. Thank you. John squeezed his hand. Take care of him, Father. And his family. They're going to need a lot of support. I will, Father Thomas promised. I absolutely will. John walked back to his rental car where Marcus waited. As they drove away from Millbrook, John looked back at the church bell tower one more time. The tower where a boy had nearly died, where a bell had rung like an SOS signal, where life had won over death, at least for today. He pulled out his phone and made a note. Call Pittsburgh Hospital. Ask about Timothy Walsh, get contact info. Set up college fund. He would keep his promise. He would check on Timothy. And he would do more, much more, because that's what you did when someone's life touched yours like that. You didn't just walk away. You stayed connected. You helped. You made sure the miracle continued. 3 weeks later, Timothy Walsh sat in the common room of the psychiatric unit at Millbrook Regional Hospital. The room had comfortable chairs and a television that was always on. Board games sat on shelves. Windows looked out over a garden. It wasn't as scary as Timothy had imagined. The nurses were kind. The other kids here had their own stories, their own pain. Timothy didn't feel so alone anymore. He met with a therapist every day. Dr. Sarah Chen was young and patient. She didn't judge him. She listened while he talked about the guilt and the fear and the feeling that he was drowning. She taught him about depression, how it was a real illness, how his brain chemistry was off balance, how it wasn't his fault. She also taught him coping skills, ways to recognize when his thoughts were lying to him, ways to ask for help before things got too dark, ways to be gentle with himself. Timothy learned that he had been carrying weight that never belonged to him. His father's injury, his family's money problems. None of it was his responsibility to fix. His parents visited every single day. His mom would bring his favorite snacks even though they couldn't afford them. His dad wheeled himself through the halls to sit with Timothy for hours. Emma came on weekends. She drew him pictures and told him stories about school. She never once asked why he was here. She just hugged him tight and said she missed him. Father Thomas visited twice a week. He brought books and magazines. He prayed with Timothy when Timothy wanted it. He just sat quietly when Timothy didn't want to talk. The old priest had become like a grandfather to Timothy, and John Cena kept his promise. 5 days after the bell tower incident, John showed up at the hospital. He signed autographs for the staff. He met other kids on the unit. But mostly he spent time with Timothy. They talked for 2 hours. John brought a chessboard. He taught Timothy how to play. They didn't talk much about the tower. They talked about movies and wrestling and normal things. It felt good to be normal. Before John left that day, he handed Timothy an envelope. "Don't open this until I'm gone," he said with a smile. After John left, Timothy opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and several documents. The letter was written in John's handwriting. Timothy read it slowly, his eyes getting wider with each line. "Timothy," the letter said, "I've been thinking about you and your family a lot. I've been thinking about how to help without making it weird or uncomfortable. Here's what I figured out. I talked to some people. Good people who want to help. We've set up a few things. First, there's a college fund for you and Emma. It's already got $50,000 in it. By the time you graduate high school, there will be enough for both of you to go to college without debt. Second, I talked to some doctors I know, specialists in spinal injuries. They've agreed to see your dad, no charge. They think they might be able to help him more than his current doctors have. Third, I contacted the Construction Workers Union. They have a hardship fund. Your family qualifies. They're going to help with some of the bills. And fourth, I called the soccer league. Emma's back on the team. Her fees are covered for the next 4 years. Don't thank me. Just get better, just live. That's all the thanks I need. Your friend John." Timothy read the letter 3 times. Then he cried. But these were different tears than the ones he cried on the bell tower. These were tears of relief, of hope, of gratitude. He wasn't fixed. He still had hard days ahead. But for the first time in 6 months, he could see a future. He could imagine being okay. The news about what happened in Millbrook spread slowly at first, then all at once. A local reporter heard about it from a friend who worked at the hospital. She wrote an article for the Millbrook Gazette. Local boy saved by wrestling star John Cena. The story was picked up by regional papers, then by national news reporters called John's publicist. They wanted interviews. They wanted the dramatic story. John refused most of them. He didn't want to exploit Timothy's pain. He didn't want to turn a suicide attempt into entertainment. But he did agree to one interview with a small network that focused on mental health awareness. The interviewer asked him why he ran to the church that day. John thought about it for a moment. "I heard someone asking for help," he said simply. "And I had the ability to respond. That's not heroic. That's just being human. We should all do that for each other," the interviewer pushed. "But most people wouldn't have run toward danger like that." John shook his head. It wasn't danger. It was a kid in pain. And here's what I want people to understand. Timothy is a hero. Not me. He rang that bell. He asked for help. That took more courage than anything I've ever done in a wrestling ring. If anyone watching this is struggling like Timothy was, please ring your bell. However you can. Tell someone. Call a hotline. Go to a hospital. Ask for help. Your life matters. You matter. The interview went viral. Millions of people watched it. The comment section filled with people sharing their own stories. People who had been where Timothy was. People who had lost someone to suicide. People who were currently struggling. The conversation grew. Mental health organizations saw a spike in calls to their hotlines. Timothy watched the interview from his hospital room. He felt strange seeing his story talked about on television. But he also felt something else. He felt like his pain had meaning now, like maybe his worst moment could help someone else. 2 weeks into his hospital stay, Timothy met a boy named Marcus. Marcus was 16 and had tried to overdose on pills. He was quiet and angry. He didn't talk to anyone. But one day he sat next to Timothy in the common room. "You're the bell tower kid," Marcus said. Timothy nodded. "Yeah, that took guts," Marcus said. "Asking for help like that? Didn't feel like it at the time," Timothy said. "Felt like I was just scared." "Fear is okay," Marcus said. "My therapist keeps telling me that. Being afraid means you're still fighting. He picked at a thread on his sleeve. I watched that interview with John Cena. The one where he talked about you. It made me think maybe I could fight too. Maybe I could ask for help instead of trying to handle everything myself. Timothy looked at this older kid who seemed so tough and so broken at the same time. Yeah, Timothy said. We can fight together. That's what they keep telling me. We don't have to do it alone, Marcus nodded. They sat together in silence for a while. Then Marcus asked if Timothy wanted to play video games. They played for 2 hours. It was the first time either of them had smiled in a long time. Timothy was discharged from the hospital after 3 weeks. He went home with a bag full of medications and a schedule of outpatient therapy appointments. The house looked the same but felt different. His room was exactly how he left it. His bed was made. His desk was messy with school papers. But something had shifted. The heaviness was still there sometimes. The dark thoughts still came. But now Timothy had tools to fight them. He had people to call. He had hope. The next day, Emma knocked on his bedroom door. Timothy? Can I come in? She peeked her head around the door. Her blonde hair was in pigtails. She wore her soccer uniform. Hey, Em, Timothy said. He was sitting on his bed playing on his phone. Emma came in and sat next to him. She was quiet for a minute. Then she said, I missed you so much. I missed you too, Timothy said. Are you going to be okay? Emma asked. Her voice was small and scared. Timothy thought about how to answer honestly. I'm going to have good days and bad days, he said. But yeah, I think I'm going to be okay. The doctors are helping me. Mom and Dad are helping me. And you help me too, just by being you. Emma leaned against his shoulder. Promise you won't leave again? Timothy wrapped his arm around his little sister. I promise. I'm staying right here. Emma smiled. Good. Because I need help with my math homework, and you're the only one who explains it in a way that makes sense. Timothy laughed. It felt strange to laugh. But good, really good. I'm terrible at math, but okay. Let's do it. The following Sunday, the Walsh family went to church together. It was the first time Timothy had been back to St. Mary's since that October morning. He felt nervous walking up the steps. People stared at him. They knew what had happened. Everyone in town knew. Timothy wanted to turn around and go home, but his dad wheeled beside him and his mom held his hand, so he kept walking. Inside, Father Thomas greeted them with a huge smile. He hugged Timothy for a long time. Welcome back, he said. We've missed you. The church service was normal. Hymns and prayers and a sermon about forgiveness. But at the end, Father Thomas did something different. He called Timothy up to the front. Timothy's face went red. He didn't want to be up there with everyone looking at him. But Father Thomas gestured kindly and Timothy walked forward. This young man, Father Thomas said to the congregation, taught me something important 3 weeks ago. He taught me that asking for help is not weakness. It's strength. It's courage. Timothy rang our bell that morning. He rang it loud and clear, and because he did, he's still here with us today. The priest looked at Timothy. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for staying. The congregation erupted in applause. People stood up. They clapped and some cried. Timothy felt overwhelmed, but also loved, so loved. He looked out at all these faces. People he had known his whole life. People who cared about him even when he couldn't see it. After the service, dozens of people came up to talk to Timothy and his family. They brought casseroles and offers of help. Mrs. Henderson from down the street said she would drive Robert to his doctor appointments. Mr. Parker offered to mow their lawn for free. The Martinez family gave Maria gift cards to the grocery store. The community was wrapping around the Walsh family like a blanket. Over the following months, life slowly improved. Robert started seeing the specialists John had arranged. They tried new treatments, physical therapy every day, experimental procedures. After 6 months, Robert was able to walk with a cane for short distances. He would never be the same as before the accident. But he was better. He found work doing dispatch for a construction company. He could work from home. The pay was decent. Not as much as before, but enough. Maria cut back to 2 jobs instead of 3. She started sleeping more, eating better. She joined a support group for parents of kids with mental health issues. She learned she wasn't alone. Other families struggled too. Other kids hurt like Timothy hurt. It helped to talk about it. Emma thrived back on the soccer field. She scored 3 goals in her first game back. The team made her captain the next season. She was happy again. She still worried about Timothy sometimes, but she was learning that worrying was normal, that families take care of each other. Timothy continued therapy twice a week. He took his medication every day. He still had bad days. Days when getting out of bed felt impossible. Days when the dark thoughts whispered lies. But he had learned to recognize those days. To call his therapist. To talk to his parents. To hold on until the feeling passed. And it always passed. He returned to school. It was hard at first. Kids whispered. They stared. Some were mean about it, but others were surprisingly kind. His friend Jake, who he hadn't talked to in months, came up to him at lunch. "Want to sit with us?" Jake asked. Timothy did. They talked about video games and normal stuff. It felt good. Timothy also started volunteering at a crisis hotline. Once a week, he would go to the community center and take calls from people who were struggling. He would listen to their pain and their fear. He would tell them they weren't alone. That help was available. That life could get better. He was good at it. People told him he had a gift for making them feel heard. And every few months, Cena would text him. "Just checking in. How you doing, brother?" Timothy would text back with honest updates. The good and the bad. John always responded with encouragement. Sometimes he would send funny memes. Sometimes serious advice. But he always responded. He never forgot. 4 years later, Timothy Walsh stood at his high school graduation. He wore a blue cap and gown. His family sat in the audience cheering loudly. His dad stood up from his wheelchair to clap. His mom cried happy tears. Emma whistled through her fingers. Timothy graduated with honors. He had been accepted to Penn State University with a full-ride scholarship. He was going to study social work. He wanted to help kids like him. Kids who felt hopeless. Kids who needed someone to ring the bell with them. As he walked across the stage to get his diploma, Timothy thought about that October morning 4 years ago. The cold wind on the bell tower, the dark thoughts that almost won, the sound of the bell ringing like an SOS signal. Cena running up the stairs, Father Thomas praying, his parents loving him even when he couldn't love himself. He thought about how close he had come to missing this moment. This day, this future, how close he had come to making a permanent choice for a temporary problem. But he didn't. He rang the bell. He asked for help. He stayed. And now look at him. Graduating. Going to college. Living. Really living. In the audience, Father Thomas sat with the Walsh family. The old priest was retired now, but he wouldn't have missed this for anything. Next to him sat a man wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. Cena had flown in that morning. He wanted to be here for this. He wanted to see the end of the story that started on a bell tower, or really the beginning, because this wasn't the end. This was Timothy just getting started. After the ceremony, Timothy found John in the crowd. They hugged like old friends, because that's what they were now. Connected forever by that one October morning. "I'm proud of you," John said. "Look at you. Look how far you've come," Timothy smiled. "I wouldn't be here without you." John shook his head. "You'd be here. Maybe not the exact same way, but you were always strong enough to make it. I just helped you see that." They talked for a while. About college. About the future. About the past. Then John had to go. He had a flight to catch. But before he left, he said one more thing. "Keep ringing the bell, Timothy. Whenever you need to. For yourself or for others. Keep making noise. Keep asking for help. Keep helping others ask. That's how we all survive." Timothy nodded. "I will. I promise." Years later, when Timothy Walsh was a licensed therapist working with at-risk teenagers, he kept a picture in his office. It was from his high school graduation day. Him, Cena, Father Thomas, and his family all together. Smiling, alive, grateful. Under the picture was a small brass plaque with an engraving. It said simply, "Ring the bell." And sometimes, late at night when Timothy was on call for a crisis line, he would hear someone on the other end of the phone in terrible pain. Someone ready to give up, someone standing on their own metaphorical bell tower, and Timothy would tell them his story. About the church bell that rang like an SOS signal. About the famous wrestler who came running. About a boy who chose life even when death seemed easier. And then he would say, "I hear your bell. I'm here. You're not alone. Let's get through this together. Because that's what you did. You answered the bell. You ran toward people in pain. You saved each other. Again and again and again. That was the miracle of Millbrook. Not that one boy was saved one time, but that his saving created ripples, rings of help spreading outward, touching more and more people. The bell still rang in that church every Sunday, calling people to prayer, calling them to community, calling them to each other. But for Timothy Walsh and everyone whose life he touched after, the bell meant something more. It meant hope was possible, help was available, and every single life was worth saving.